Mr. Amit Agnihatri, who, as you know, is the sole founder and whatever you call it of this conclave. And I really appreciate the fact that he decided to bring it here. Dr. Nilanjan Sen, our guest from New York, Mr. Sam Srinivasan, iconic name in the banking world, and a very, very distinguished gathering of academic leaders, institutional leaders. Right here are my deans, some of my faculty, members of my staff, and of course students. We are privileged as an institution to be able to host this one-of-a-kind conclave, very unique in its conception, and it's very relevant in the way it attracts a lot of practitioners, professionals, academics, government servants. And the critical theme is, of course, measuring MBA outcomes. I'll spend some time on saying how we have mismeasured outcomes so far. That is why the topic comes into being. We don't talk of pollution if you have clean air. So how have we mismeasured outcomes for a long time can be the basis of our investigation. I'm not sure I'm a great research scientist, but I can at least throw light based on my intuitive understanding of institutions from the perspective of custodian of one of the national schools for a long, long time. The first mismeasure is that we decide, and we have decided for a long time, that outcome will be determined by the income. It's a ratio of the annual fee that you pay as opposed to the return on investment as a result of the first salary that you get. That ratio itself has become the rallying point in the media. Even in IIM, if you could just keep your phones on the silent mode in deference to people who actually want to listen, right? And so if you would just do that. As a protocol, we don't insist on it, but it'll be useful for the next few speakers, right? So those ratios, first year salary versus the amount of fee I pay. Now you can look at some research evidence. Only last week I was teaching an MBA class, liberal studies in management, and we did a spot survey. And we asked a question, how many of you have come to the MBA program willingly because of your innate need to do an MBA, or how many of you have been influenced by others to do this? And 80% said we've come because we were influenced. Trust me, that's the data that we're getting from the IIM system. 77.5% in answer to the question, whether they would choose high package over tedious work, they said they would choose the high package. I was in IIM Raipur last month, and a student asked me a question that what should be the criteria for choosing the first job. I said, the first job is only the stepping stone for multiple jobs that you will tend to have. And so imagine you taking a job for a company which folds up in a couple of years. Would that be a prudent choice then, no matter what the package was? So that sets him thinking, but I'm not sure it'll change his mind about how to choose jobs. So that's the first mismeasure, where we decide that a monetary value placed on the first year salary could be the decisive outcome of an MBA. And for a long time, unlike many other good B schools, they don't tom-tom their salaries right up front in the media. We do, and I don't know, for strange and sublime reasons. That's the first mismeasure. The second mismeasure is that the MBA creates a very narrow worldview. And this worldview is determined by an equation called if equal to then. If I have this, then I'm considered successful. If I get the top 5% jobs or ABC or the top 3 consulting firms, I've made it. And it doesn't come just from the indigenous soil of India. It's a question, I faced long back. I had a very unsuccessful attempt to publish an article in the Harvard Business Review. I actually was living in Watertown, close to Boston. I was a Fulbright scholar at the Kennedy School. And I had I thought was a very powerful paper to be worthy of publishing in the Harvard Business School. So I walked into the office of the editor. Her name was Susie Whitelofer. I don't know if that name strikes a bell, but she looked at my article diligently, read it, and he said, my Italian grandmother said, if you want to publish in the Harvard Business Review for managers, the question they would ask is, so what? It's a great paper, but so what? So what? Susie Whitelofer later on married Jack Welch. And they started another MBA program. The question, so what, is based on this difficult to then paradigm. If you can change this from so what to so why, I think the conversations will shift in business schools in a big way. But it is still so what? So what is the amount of money that you got? So what is the pedigree that you acquired? So what is your value in the matrimonial market going forward? I'm raising some very inconvenient truths, but these are issues that needs to be confronted by academics. And so from a purpose-centric to a narrow goal-centric world has been the degenerative, and I'm looking at the fundamentals behind the data that you threw up, that Amit threw up. We are facing facts, but truth is greater than facts, and reality is greater than any personal truth. So we have to hint at the fact that go beyond the facts and start looking at the mismeasure. The third mismeasure of the MBA is that MBA is a professional program. You must pick up transferable skills from the market, and theories don't matter. Theories don't matter. It's not a theoretical course. I mean, that is another major fatal flaw. Unless you have, what theories do is it gives you a framework for looking at the world, for even predicting the world, when you can't live in an uncertain world forever. So theories do matter. You know, my first understanding of why theories mattered came from a person whose name is John Naisbitt. If you recall, he was the author who created this series called Mega Trends. He worked with 4 US presidents, and he told me Debashis very early, and then I was lucky to be one of the 15 people invited by John Cotter at the Harvard Business School. John Naisbitt had the most impact in my mind. And he told me something very interesting. He said, very early on in life, if you have a strong framework, which is based out of human experience, namely, he was talking about a theory, a powerful theory, you can pick up nuances and you can create models that would be very enduring. And it stayed with me for a long time. So why would theories be important? Because they will help us categorize, explain, predict. But more importantly, they'll talk about a deep sense of what human nature is all about, because MBA cannot exist except human nature. Why do we do an MBA in the first place? So the fundamentals have to be very clear. So looking at these 3 mismeasures, I would like to describe, at the cost of sounding a little narcissistic on behalf of my institution, as to how we have addressed these issues going forward, and so that if it is worth anything, you might want to draw some insights from it. The first thing, we decide to give ourselves a very large worldview. Wherever you go on campus, I am sure you will have a chance to visit around, you'll see globalizing Indian thought. I mean, it's literally hitting your eyes, literally. And it need to be said over and over again, because if we do not have that kind of a vision, that kind of a worldview, we get consumed, subsumed by fads of the month. Here is 360 degree, here is just in time, here is Kaizen. But where is India in all of that? What is Indian about the Indian Institute of Management? And so we have a worldview that we grow as India grows, in an economy that's growing as rapidly as we are. Amit mentioned about $5 trillion economy, but we do see India's soft power assets vibrant, valuable, growing exponentially. Not just the economic terms, but in terms of larger ecological footprints India will live, social footprints India will live. And so looking at all of that, globalizing Indian thought does not seem like a very unworthy vision. It connects our future to our past. You know, very importantly, we had a date. We said we'll create a coffee table book called 2047. During my first term as director here, we got together. A bunch of my colleagues and I put together a coffee table book, and it was called 2047. You might wonder, what is that date all about? It's about the inflection point of 50 years of IIM Kozhikode in 2047 and 100 years of politically independent India. And we asked a question, if you have to be relevant as a business school in 2047, what we have to do? We asked this question, we send out these questions in the form of the book to who's who of India, all chief ministers, Prime Minister's office, the President, Chief Justice. I got responses from a lot of them, but most importantly from 2 people. One Chief Minister of Bengal who offered me a job, and the second one from Gujarat who offered me a consolation that this is not a work in vain. And many years later, only this year, I get a call from the Education Secretary of India. And he says, you know, he first calls me as sir, which is very unusual. Secretaries do not address academics as sir, but he did. And I thought he must have something in mind. And I asked him, what do you want from me? He said, we want a report on India 2047. Why? Because the Prime Minister has asked his cabinet to create a vision for 2047. And the Cabinet Secretary has asked 8 secretaries, and I'm representing all of them, to create vision for India. And later on, it will be distributed to district magistrates of India. And Prime Minister's office, somebody said there's a crazy person somewhere in Kozhikode who had written a book, so trace that book. So you can see the point is that a pipe dream became a national policy, at least a national vision. We structured something without knowing what impact it will have. So this worldview does help. It helps because in practice, management is more a performing art than it is anything else. And so if you need how to perform, you need the art component, which is the subjective element of what are you going to perform around. And so our vision is driven by 3 very compelling values: Satyam, Nityam, Purnam. Authenticity, sustainability, fulfillment. And these are the driving forces that create that big picture that we think all business schools together must arrive at. It cannot be a solo vision of one institution. Since we have clubbed it with our national vision, I am sure some of you might want to have a conversation around this. The second issue we moved into was moving our ethos from standardized mediocrity to a diversified excellence. See, if you see MBAs copy each other, our pedagogy is more or less the same. Case study methods, the same stuff getting recycled in multiple, perhaps a little more sophisticated format, the same paradigms. So we said we'll disrupt the IIM norm of only a standalone PGP program. We said we will have an MBA in Liberal Studies in Management. We said in the same year, we launched 4 new programs, unthinkable given the IIM's conservatism, right? MBA in Liberal Studies in Management, MBA in Finance, Business Leadership Program of 1 year, and PhD practice track. All this was launched within a period of about 16 to 18 months. My deans, Professor Anand Kutan, in particular, was the one who actually drove the whole execution of what we thought was conceptually a very sound model. Because as we move from copying each other, we look at diversity as the basis of what you might describe as innovation. Our diversity made our innovation possible. We were surprised this year, the liberal studies in management students were picked up ahead of the finance students by banks. Shyam, you'd like to know this. And we asked them because we thought finance was specialization for banks. They said, no, banks are looking for things other than finance specialization. You'll be surprised, Mahindras and Tatas are talking about Gandhian leadership, which is the basis of picking up students from campus. Trust me, I'm telling you, giving you raw data from this year's placement practice. Why would they say so? Why would they do what they're doing? Primarily because they are looking beyond the structured way of approaching excellence, which is not one method, one module, we look more like each other at the end of the day. And so what happens to the vast creative reservoir called India? What happens to problems that cannot be solved through conventional methods? And so the last element is that we looked at this school not as a school of pushing curriculum and conventional courses, but a school of generative ideas. How will a school become a school of generative ideas? Only when we look at the larger societal forces which impact the IIM system. So our thumb rule for running the school is our intellectual capital multiplied by our social capital becomes our reputation capital. And if we have earned if you're worthy of your recall value, you're worthy of the kind of reputation that you associate us with, it's largely because as a society, as a community, IIM Kozhikode considers itself extremely lucky that we are here, not in the business of just sending out people in the job market. We're in the business of creating competent and compassionate professionals. That's the most important driver for our change. Because we believe human nature is a combination of 4 key elements: rationality, emotional capability, willpower, and ingenuity. If you don't have them in equal measure, more so ingenuity because we are talking about a very uncertain world. We don't nurture these values in equal measure. We'll have a very lopsided, underperforming, substandard, with diminishing returns on the tag called MBA. Do you want some of that? This is a question that I don't have answers for. The answers should come through our deliberations. Thank you for listening in.